He was the only one there with both situations, with my ex-wife and with my daughter, and they both died the same way.
Oh,
so
wow.
you
Okay.
think that he killed Whitney as well?
I believe so.
The hardest thing I had to do in my life was tell my daughter to let go.
Including their. And Brown is pointing fingers tonight about the tragic loss of his daughter, Bobbi Kristina.
For years, the tragic deaths of Bobbi Kristina and her mother, Whitney Houston, have left the world with more questions than answers. But now, Bobby Brown is finally exposing the unbelievable details about what really went down in the lives of his daughter and ex-wife. Both women died under eerily similar circumstances, and both leaving behind a trail of secrets that some believe may have ties to dark Hollywood rituals. Bobby Brown has lived through it all, and now he's ready to speak up about the truth behind his daughter's tragic passing and what really happened to Whitney.
When you find love, you find it. I mean, it finds you, I should say. Between me and her, it was so instant. We were so much like each other.
The death of Bobbi Kristina Brown has been shrouded in mystery for years. After her untimely passing at just 21 years old, many people have been left wondering what exactly happened. On January 31st, 2015, Bobbi Kristina was found unconscious in her Georgia home, lying face down in a bathtub, eerily similar to her mother, Whitney Houston, who died in a bathtub in 2012.
You walk through that door and you see her much like you saw Whitney.
It was literally, it was a nightmare all over again.
Bobbi Kristina was rushed to the hospital and placed in a medically induced coma, but never regained consciousness. 6 months later, on July 26, 2015, she passed away. While the autopsy later revealed that she died from lobar pneumonia, the circumstances leading up to her death were just as unclear as those surrounding her mother's. Many have speculated that there's something darker at play here, perhaps Hollywood rituals tied to her tragic death, and the possibility that she was silenced after knowing who was truly behind her mother's passing. Was Bobbi Kristina's death just a tragic accident, or was something more sinister happening behind the scenes? Bobbi Kristina grew up in the public eye thanks to her famous parents, Whitney Houston and Bobby Brown. From a young age, she was thrust into the spotlight. Her first public appearance with her mother showed her as a confident young woman, and by the time she was a teenager, she had her own celebrity status. Bobbi Kristina was known for her natural beauty and her love for singing, but despite being a celebrity, she led a life filled with chaos and pain.
People said to me, the one thing that they heard over and over again, that you were the one that led Whitney to heavy use.
Her family's struggles with and domestic issues affected her deeply, and as she grew older, Bobbi Kristina found herself caught up in her own personal battles. She was still trying to get her career on track when her mother passed away, leaving her devastated. But as a young woman trying to make her mark, she was also set to inherit millions from her mother's estate, adding another layer of mystery to her death. In January 2015, just 2 months before her 21st birthday, Bobbi Kristina was found unresponsive in her bathtub, mirroring her mother's tragic passing. Although she was rushed to the hospital, she was never able to recover, and 6 months later, she passed away. The initial autopsy was inconclusive, providing no clear answers about how she ended up in that bathtub. Was it just a horrible accident, or did someone play a role in her demise? The question of whether she was silenced looms large, especially since she had been known to have a strained relationship with her family and those closest to her.
Yeah, I take my part, and I take it hard for me even being a part of it. But we all have our own minds.
In public, the young couple glowed with promise.
Looking at Bobbi Kristina's life, we can see that she was deeply affected by her mother's struggles with substances and the turmoil that plagued their family. In the wake of her mother's death, Bobbi Kristina was left to deal with the aftermath, and many speculate that she may have uncovered things about her mother's death that were too dangerous to be revealed. Some believe that Bobbi Kristina's death was tied to rituals commonly associated with the entertainment industry, especially especially considering the similar manner of both her and Whitney's passing. Was Bobbi Kristina trying to expose something about her mother's death and the people involved? Could she have been silenced by powerful figures in the industry to keep those secrets hidden? Bobbi Kristina's childhood was marked by constant chaos and emotional turmoil. Her mother, Whitney, struggled with which impacted her career and family life. Despite Whitney's attempts to turn her life around, the damage had already been done, and Bobbi Kristina grew up in an environment filled with addiction and violence.
Lord, I just want to be a real person.
At just 10 years old, Bobbi Kristina witnessed her father, Bobby Brown, being charged with putting hands on her mother, but Whitney stood by him. This constant exposure to violence, substances, and domestic turmoil undoubtedly had a significant impact on Bobbi Kristina's life and may have contributed to her own struggles later on.
Well, that was the first time I had actually saw her do. Yes, ma'am.
As Bobbi Kristina became an adult, she continued to face challenges. She was in a turbulent relationship with Nick Gordon, who had been taken in by her family, but the relationship turned toxic. Despite these struggles, Bobbi Kristina remained close to her mother's legacy and tried to carry on her career aspirations, but it was clear that her past and family history cast a shadow over her future. After Whitney Houston's tragic death, Bobbi Kristina seemed to spiral further into chaos. As she tried to cope with losing her mother, something strange started to happen. Photographs began to surface of Bobbi Kristina looking thinner and thinner. While her weight loss itself wasn't a direct cause of her eventual death, it was a clear marker of the emotional and psychological turmoil she was facing. The pressures of grief and the loss of her mother were becoming too much to handle.
It wasn't her. She did, but it didn't do her. She knew how to handle herself.
As if things weren't bad enough, the autopsy report revealed some additional details about Bobbi Kristina's body. She had several tattoos on her arms and torso. Tattoos often serve as a symbol of the person's inner world, and in Bobbi Kristina's case, her tattoo with the initials WEH could have been a tribute to her mother, Whitney. The tattoo was a mark of the deep connection she still had to her mother's memory, even as her life continued to unravel. As Bobbi Kristina continued to struggle, she turned more and more to Nick Gordon, who seemed to fill the void left by her mother's passing. But Nick wasn't the solid influence that Bobbi Kristina needed. Instead, he became more like a handler, keeping her isolated from her family and encouraging destructive behavior. The Houston family was already skeptical of Nick's true intentions, and the tension between him and the rest of the family only grew. Walls went up, and Bobbi Kristina was left even more alone with Nick in her life. During the months that followed, Bobbi Kristina and Nick moved into an apartment in Atlanta. The couple was regularly throwing wild parties, and neighbors constantly called 911 because of the noise. The partying and the chaos were an obvious sign that things were not well with Bobbi Kristina. A neighbor even noted that the noise coming from her apartment was often accompanied by people smoking dope, adding another layer to the troubling situation.
I know, right?
In 2014, as Bobbi Kristina and Nick Gordon's relationship continued to intensify, something shocking happened. They suddenly held a press call without any warning or prior notice to announce that they had secretly gotten married. There was no ceremony, no wedding photos, just an abrupt declaration. Bobbi Kristina gushed about Nick, calling him her backbone and the person who was everything to her. My side, my front, my head, shoulders, everything.
What can you tell us about the wedding? Come on, tell us. Was it in Georgia? Was it in LA?
You know
where
what?
Did you
know
go?
what we can tell you is that next year, the ceremony will be beautiful.
Yes.
But while Bobbi Kristina was seemingly blinded by love, her friends and family began to grow more and more concerned about Nick's increasing control over her. People who were close to her saw just how much he was dominating her life, especially after her mother's passing. They even went as far as to conduct their own investigation, speaking with Bobbi Kristina's friends, who all said the same thing. Nick was taking full control of her life.
I got home. We had a slight argument, and then we cleared things up. We went upstairs, laid with each other for a little bit,
As much as Bobbi Kristina loved him unconditionally, she couldn't see what was really happening. The situation had become very similar to her mother's marriage to Bobby Brown, a relationship full of control and destruction. Those closest to Bobbi Kristina wished she had recognized the signs before things spiraled out of control. When Bobbi Kristina was 17, photos surfaced showing her allegedly snorting snow, but at the time, she denied it, claiming the pictures were a setup by a friend. However, the autopsy report and the presence of benzoylecgonine in her blood made it clear Bobbi Kristina had indeed been using snow, following in the tragic footsteps of her mother, Whitney Houston. This revelation raised even more questions about how much influence Nick Gordon had over her and whether he was fueling her downward spiral instead of helping her get clean. Some believe that Nick was positioned in Bobbi Kristina's life to ensure she stayed quiet, to make sure she didn't expose the truth about what really happened to her mother. Even Bobby Brown, Bobbi Kristina's father, has alleged that Nick Gordon was present at the time of both Whitney Houston's and Bobbi Kristina's deaths. Bobby Brown has raised serious concerns, suggesting that Nick knew exactly what happened in both cases. He believes that Nick might have had a hand in the events leading up to both women's tragic deaths. The idea that Nick could have been involved in some way, or at least witnessed what happened, has been a dark cloud hanging over the case.
Things that are being said by him recently, how do you approach that?
He knows what happened. I don't know what happened that night, but he does.
So, with everything we've uncovered, one has to ask, was Nick Gordon involved in both Whitney and Bobbi Kristina's deaths? Could there be a dangerous pattern here, or was it just a tragic series of events? And if Nick really did know what happened, why hasn't he been held accountable? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to smash that like button, hit subscribe for more revealing updates, and check out the next video on the end screen for even more in-depth coverage.